I remember the exact moment it hit me. Not the anger, not the satisfaction, just a profound, almost bone-deep calm. It was a Monday, nearly 2 weeks after I walked out of Commonwealth Financial Services for the last time, and I was sitting at my kitchen counter in Oak Park, Illinois, sipping coffee. My phone had been a constant buzz for days, a symphony of panicked voicemails and desperate texts, but for the first time, I felt utterly disconnected from it all. Like I was watching a storm from a safe, distant shore. It was the moment I realized I wasn't just done with that company, I was done with waiting for validation. Done with proving my worth to people who refused to see it. But to really understand how I got to that point, to that quiet, resolute no, we have to go back. Back to 4 years earlier, when I first walked into their gleaming Chicago offices, brimming with a very different kind of hope. I was 32 when I started at Commonwealth. They weren't a bank, exactly, but a mid-sized firm managing wealth, retirement accounts, and investment portfolios for a lot of high-net-worth clients. The kind of place where a single security incident could wipe them out overnight. We're talking social security numbers, bank routing information, investment strategies, sensitive data for over 12,000 people. When I first joined, the security situation was, well, it was a horror show. Passwords in plain text files, on a shared drive, accessible to anyone. Encryption protocols stuck in 2015. The database architecture was held together with what felt like duct tape and prayers, the last IT guy whispered before he quit. Nobody had touched the back-end system since. Management didn't get technology, they just wanted it to work when they clicked a button. My official title was Systems Developer. Entry-level, according to Human Resources. But the actual job demanded senior-level expertise across about half a dozen specializations. They hired me to maintain existing code and handle basic troubleshooting. What I actually did over the next 4 years was rebuild their entire security infrastructure from the ground up. All while they paid me like I was restocking printer paper. My first week, I ran a basic security audit. Found 17 critical vulnerabilities in the client database alone. 17. Any halfway decent hacker could have waltzed in, taken everything, and probably left a polite thank you note. I documented it all, severity ratings, potential consequences, recommended fixes. I presented it to my supervisor, Robert Miller, the director of operations. Robert was in his mid-50s, silver-haired, always in expensive suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He had zero technical knowledge. He probably thought the cloud was something you saw when you looked up. He flipped through my report with this look, like I'd handed him something written in ancient Sumerian. "Is this really that serious?" he asked. "We've never had any problems before." I spent 20 minutes explaining how a successful breach could lead to federal investigations, millions in regulatory fines, class action lawsuits, and the complete destruction of the company's 40-year reputation. Financial services runs on trust. Lose that, and you lose everything. Robert nodded along, eyes glazing over around minute 8. "Fine," he said finally. "Fix whatever needs fixing, but don't let it interfere with your regular duties." Regular duties meant help desk tickets for forgotten passwords and crashing Excel. Real cutting-edge stuff. So, I started working 12-hour days. Came in early, stayed late, spent weekends researching best practices. I rebuilt their entire authentication system. Tossed the plain text passwords and implemented proper hashing with salted encryption. Set up multi-factor authentication for sensitive data. Created audit trails for every access attempt. Then, I tackled the database encryption. This is where things got really interesting. The existing encryption was a joke. I knew it, anyone with a computer science degree would know it. For a financial firm with this much sensitive data, we needed something bulletproof. Something custom. I spent 8 months designing and building a proprietary encryption framework from scratch. Not to show off, but because off-the-shelf solutions just weren't enough for their specific needs, their regulatory demands. The core of it was a rotating key architecture. Every 48 hours, the system would generate new encryption keys based on a mathematical algorithm I developed specifically for this application. The old keys would expire, the new ones would take over. Seamless transition, zero downtime, maximum security. Even if a bad actor somehow got the current keys, they'd be useless within 2 days. Any potential breach had a built-in expiration date. But here's the thing about custom encryption systems that management never understood: they need ongoing maintenance from someone who actually understands how they work. My key rotation algorithm wasn't something I copied from Stack Overflow. It was built on mathematical principles I'd researched and tested for months. Without understanding those principles, you couldn't modify the system, extend the rotation period, or recover from a lockout. I documented everything meticulously, in a secure location only I could access. For 3 years, the system ran perfectly. Not a single incident, not a single breach, not a single compliance failure. Commonwealth went from a security nightmare to passing every federal inspection with flying colors. Regulators who used to schedule follow-up visits started sending routine approval letters. Client confidence soared. New business rolled in. All because of work that happened invisibly in the background. While I was in the server room, Robert was in executive presentations, taking credit. He called it his Operational Excellence Initiative. Talked about his strategic vision for technology modernization. My name came up once, not in presentations, not in company newsletters, not in the annual report. The work existed. The person who did it, apparently, didn't. At the end of my first year, I met with Robert to discuss my compensation and title. Systems developer didn't reflect what I did. I was their entire security department, database administrator, network architect, and infrastructure specialist, all rolled into one. I wanted senior security engineer at minimum. Robert leaned back in his chair, giving me his concerned mentor look, the one he used when he was about to say no. I appreciate your dedication, he said. But title changes require executive approval, and there's a process. Let me look into it. Months passed. Nothing. I asked again during my annual review. Robert said budgets were tight. I documented the conversation in an email to him and Karen in HR, just in case. Factual. Creating a paper trail. In my second year, I expanded the security framework to include real-time threat monitoring. Built alert systems that notified me immediately of unauthorized access attempts. I caught 3 separate phishing attacks targeting executive assistants. Stopped them before any harm. Wrote detailed incident reports. Suggested employee training. Robert forwarded my reports to the executive team with his name at the top. I asked for a raise and title change again. This time, I came prepared with market research. The average salary for someone with my responsibilities was almost double what Commonwealth was paying me. A title wasn't just about ego, it affected future job prospects, industry recognition, internal credibility. Robert nodded thoughtfully, said he understood, and would advocate for me personally. These things just take time, he told me. Nothing happened. Meanwhile, they hired 2 new project managers at salaries higher than mine. Their job was to organize meetings. They had impressive titles. Neither could explain what a database was. By my 3rd year, I stopped asking politely. I started putting things in writing, formal requests through HR, documented market rate disparities, comparisons to competitor firms. Professional, factual, impossible to ignore. Robert called me into his office, annoyed. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be," he said. "HR has processes." I told you I was handling it. It's been 3 years. Nothing has changed. These things take time. How much time? What's the actual timeline? What are the specific criteria I need to meet? He didn't have answers. Because there weren't any. The criteria was whatever he decided it was. The timeline was never. The process was designed to make me give up. I stopped pushing. But I also started quietly interviewing elsewhere. Every conversation confirmed it, my skills were worth significantly more. My fourth year accelerated toward the collision point. Robert announced in January that he was bringing in a new operations manager for technology. Someone with fresh perspective and executive presence. Her name was Olivia Hayes. 30 years old, MBA from a respectable program. Zero technical background. She'd worked in retail management and then for her father's real estate company. Her father, Arthur Hayes, was one of Commonwealth's founding partners. The guy who still had his name on the original charter. Olivia was introduced at a company-wide meeting. Robert beamed. Called her a dynamic leader with innovative perspectives. Said she'd oversee all technology operations, including my security function, reporting directly to him. My department, meaning me. I was still the only one in it. No budget for additional headcount, Robert said. But apparently, there was budget for a 6-figure salary for the founder's daughter to manage someone she couldn't possibly understand. Olivia's first week, she scheduled an orientation meeting with me. I expected a conversation about the technical infrastructure. Instead, she spent 45 minutes talking about synergy and cross-functional optimization and leveraging core competencies. Business school buzzwords. When I tried to explain the actual systems I managed, she held up her hand, smiling. I don't need the weeds, she said. That's your job. I'm here to provide strategic direction and stakeholder management. You keep the engines running, and let me worry about where we're driving. Strategic direction meant making decisions without understanding what they affected. Stakeholder management meant taking credit for successes and blaming me for failures. Keep the engines running meant do all the actual work while she collected the salary and the title. Over the next 3 months, Olivia implemented changes that made zero technical sense but looked impressive in PowerPoint. She wanted weekly status reports, color-coded sections, executive summaries. None of it improved security. All of it created busy work. She wanted security documentation rewritten to be more accessible to non-technical stakeholders, which meant dumbing down critical specifications until they were useless. She wanted the threat monitoring dashboard redesigned with better graphics. Functionality didn't matter. Aesthetics did. Once, she suggested blockchain integration for our security protocols because she'd read an article. I spent 30 minutes explaining why that made no sense. She nodded, said she'd think about it strategically. The next week, she mentioned it in an executive meeting as something she was exploring. Left out my part entirely. Meanwhile, I kept the actual systems running. Fixed problems before they became disasters. Maintained the encryption infrastructure through 2 key rotation issues that could have caused serious problems. Handled the real work that kept 12,000 clients' data safe while Olivia presented slides about digital transformation. Then came the Thursday in April that changed everything. I'd been tracking job openings for months, had conversations with 3 promising companies. One was a direct competitor, offering a legitimate security architect role that paid almost triple my salary. I had real options. But I wanted one final attempt to get what I deserved at Commonwealth. I scheduled a meeting directly with Robert, going over Olivia's head. I came prepared with documentation that would make any HR professional weep, market salary data, a comprehensive list of every project, the security audit results, industry certifications, speaking invitations, for years of contributions summarized in a 12-page report. Robert kept glancing at his watch. 5 minutes in, he interrupted. I appreciate your dedication, he said. The same words he'd used 3 years ago. But I think there's some fundamental confusion about your role here. You're a coder. An important one, sure. Technical people are valuable, but titles are for leaders. You're not managing a team. You're not setting strategic direction. You're maintaining systems. That's valuable work, but it's not leadership work. I built those systems from scratch, I said. The encryption infrastructure alone took 8 months of 12-hour days. Robert waved his hand dismissively. Building and leading are different skill sets. Olivia leads the technology strategy. You implement it. That's the structure we've established, and it's working well. Working well? Olivia doesn't understand the first thing about what I actually do. Last week, she asked me why we couldn't just use Google to secure our client data. She's learning, growing into the role. That's normal for any new leader. So, Olivia gets a leadership title and a 6-figure salary for asking questions and attending meetings, while I get called a coder for building the infrastructure that keeps this company compliant with federal security regulations? Robert's expression hardened. The friendly mentor mask slipped. I don't appreciate your tone, he said. Olivia has executive confidence for a reason. If you can't work productively within the structure we've established, then maybe this isn't the right environment for your career anymore. Something clicked in that moment. Not anger, exactly, but clarity. Crystal clear. Suddenly. I'd spent 4 years waiting for people to recognize my value. Hoping that if I just worked harder, delivered more, documented better, they'd eventually see what I contributed. They'd connect the dots between the secure systems and the person who built them. They'd understand that the compliance wins, the regulatory approvals, the client confidence, it all traced back to work I did alone, often in the server room at midnight. They never would. Their entire worldview was structured around the idea that people like me were interchangeable parts, replaceable units, just coders. The fact that I'd single-handedly prevented multiple potential disasters didn't register, because it happened invisibly. The fact that Olivia couldn't do any of it didn't matter, because she had the right last name and the right presentation skills. I stood up. You're right, I said. This isn't the right environment for me. I quit. Robert actually laughed, like I'd made a joke. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Effective immediately. His face changed fast. The condescending amusement vanished. Something like concern flickered through. You can't just quit. There's transition work. Knowledge transfer. We need 2 weeks' notice minimum. The security systems require, check my employment contract, I said. I'm at will. No notice period required either direction. You could remove me today without cause. I can quit today without cause. That's how at-will employment works. But the systems need maintenance. The encryption protocols need monitoring. You can't just walk away from, I'll write up a summary of current system status before I leave today. Basic information about where things stand. Beyond that, you'll need to figure it out yourselves. That's what leadership is for, right? I walked out before he could respond. Went straight to my desk. Spent the next 2 hours writing the most minimal handover document I could justify as professional. Current system status. Login credentials for administrator accounts, which I knew they'd disable immediately anyway. Location of documentation folders on the shared drive. Basic information that told them where to find things, without explaining how any of it actually worked. The detailed encryption system documentation, the mathematical foundations of the key rotation algorithm, the maintenance procedures required to keep everything functioning, that was stored in a secure repository that only I had access to. When I logged out of my account for the last time, that access went with me. I wasn't sabotaging anything. I wasn't deleting files or planting malware. I was simply leaving a job that didn't value my contribution and taking my expertise with me. That expertise was mine. I'd developed it through years of study and practice. It belonged to me, not to a company that paid me entry-level wages for senior-level work. Olivia appeared at my desk around 4 p.m., looking confused. Robert said you resigned? That's correct. But we have the quarterly security review next week. You were supposed to present our compliance status to the regulatory auditors. I'm sure you can handle it, I said. You're the technology leader, after all. Strategic direction, stakeholder management, all that stuff. She stared at me like I'd started speaking a language she didn't recognize. I gathered my personal items. A coffee mug, a few technical books, a photo of my dog, Buddy. For years of my professional life fit into a cardboard box small enough to carry with one hand. I walked out of that building at 4:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon in April. Didn't look back. Didn't say goodbye to anyone except Brenda in accounting, who looked sad but not surprised. Drove home in silence. Ordered pizza. Sat on my couch with Buddy curled up next to me and felt absolutely nothing. No regret, no second-guessing, no panic. Just the calm certainty that I'd finally made the right call. Friday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. All from Robert, Olivia, random coworkers. Even Karen, the HR director, had tried reaching me. I ignored all of them. The voicemails were a progression: Robert annoyed, then confused about system alerts, then concerned about error messages, then genuinely worried about warnings related to the encryption subsystem. I made breakfast. Scrambled eggs and toast. Took Buddy for a long walk. Went to the gym. Let my phone blow up. By Friday afternoon, the emails started: formal requests from HR for information, technical questions about error codes Olivia had forwarded without understanding, demands that I respond immediately due to the urgent and time-sensitive nature. I didn't respond. Friday evening, my girlfriend, Sarah, came over for dinner. I told her the whole story. She listened carefully. Sarah worked in hospital administration, she understood workplace dynamics. So what happens now? She asked. Now I find a job that actually values what I bring to the table. I already have some leads. And Commonwealth? I shrugged. They figure it out, or they don't. Not my problem anymore. She nodded slowly. You seem really calm about this. I am calm. First time in 4 years I don't feel like I'm waiting for permission to be recognized. I'm done asking. I'm done hoping. I'm just done. Saturday morning, 48 hours after I'd quit. My phone rang at 6:47 a.m. Robert's personal cell. I let it go to voicemail. The message was pure panic. His voice cracked. The entire database is locked, he said. Nobody can access anything. Client records. Financial data, account information, everything. The encryption system is showing some kind of key expiration error, and nothing we've tried has worked. We need you back here immediately. Name your price, whatever you want, whatever title, whatever salary. Just please call me back. I smiled. Made coffee. What Robert didn't understand was that the encryption system I'd built operated on a 48-hour key rotation cycle. Every 2 days, it generated new encryption keys and deprecated the old ones. The algorithm that generated those keys was based on mathematical principles I developed specifically for their infrastructure. Without understanding those principles, you couldn't generate valid keys. Without valid keys, you couldn't decrypt the data. Without decrypting the data, you couldn't access anything. The system worked exactly as designed. It just happened to be designed by someone they dismissed as replaceable, just a coder. I waited until 10 a.m. to call Robert back. Let him stew in the panic for a few more hours. He answered on the first ring, voice ragged, like he hadn't slept. Thank goodness, he said. We need you back here right now. The entire database is completely inaccessible. Nothing works. Olivia's been trying to reach the original software vendor, but they said our encryption system is custom and they have no documentation for it. Because I built it from scratch, remember? Long silence on his end. I remember you telling me I was just a coder, I said calmly. That titles are for leaders. That maintaining systems isn't real leadership work. I didn't mean, look, we can discuss semantics later. Right now, I need you to come in and fix this before it becomes a regulatory disaster. What exactly are you offering? He didn't hesitate. Triple your salary. Senior security architect title, whatever title you want, actually. Full benefits package with enhanced retirement matching, corner office, whatever you need. Just name it. I let that sit for a moment, savored it, honestly. For years of being underpaid, undervalued, dismissed as interchangeable, and suddenly my worth was crystal clear. Not because they'd gained new respect for my abilities, but because they were desperate. No, I said. No? What do you mean no? I mean, I'm declining your offer. I don't work there anymore. I have no interest in working there again. But you have to help us. We have client obligations, regulatory requirements. If this data stays locked, we could face federal investigation. We could lose our operating license. Sounds like a leadership problem. Maybe Olivia can provide some strategic direction. This isn't funny, Robert's voice rose. People could lose their jobs over this. The company could go under. 12,000 clients could have their financial information trapped in a system nobody can access. You should have thought about that before you told me my work didn't matter. I hung up. The rest of Saturday was peaceful. Took Buddy to the dog park, cooked dinner, watched a documentary about deep-sea exploration, went to bed early, and slept better than I had in years. Sunday morning, Robert showed up at my apartment building. Somehow got through the lobby security by telling them he was my uncle. I watched him through the peephole for 2 minutes before opening the door. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 days. Suit wrinkled, tie missing, dark circles under his eyes. Can we talk? He asked, voice pleading. Please, I'm begging you. Whatever happened between us, whatever I said, I apologize. I apologize completely. The company needs you. I need you. The company had 4 years to show me it valued my contribution, I said. It chose not to. You chose not to. We made mistakes. I made mistakes. I admit that freely. But punishing 12,000 clients because of management failures isn't fair to them. I'm not punishing anyone, I said. I quit a job where I was underpaid and disrespected. What happens after my departure isn't my responsibility. I didn't break anything. I didn't sabotage anything. I simply stopped maintaining systems that required my expertise to function. Robert's jaw tightened. We could pursue legal action. You clearly designed the system to fail intentionally if you ever left. I designed the system to be maximally secure for your client's sensitive data. That security includes sophisticated encryption that requires ongoing maintenance from qualified personnel. You chose not to develop that qualified personnel. You chose to underpay and dismiss the one person who understood the system. That's on you. But you're welcome to have your lawyers review my work. Everything I did was documented, authorized, and within the scope of my employment. I didn't plant any traps. I didn't create any back doors. I simply left. He stood there in my doorway for a long moment. The desperation in his eyes shifted to something calculating. What would it take, he asked finally. Not to come back permanently. Not even to work for us again. Just to fix this one issue. Restore access, get the systems functioning, consultant basis, whatever hourly rate you want. I thought about it carefully, not because I was tempted, but because I wanted my answer to be absolutely clear. Nothing, I said. There's nothing you could offer that would make me help you. Not money, not titles, not apologies. Not because I want revenge or want to watch you suffer, but because I don't want any relationship whatsoever with a company that only values people when it's desperate. You had 4 years to treat me fairly. You chose not to. That choice has consequences. I don't owe you anything. I don't owe Commonwealth anything. And I'm certainly not going to rescue you from a situation your own decisions created. I closed the door. He stood there for another minute. I heard him walk away eventually. Monday morning, I had 3 interviews scheduled with companies I'd been cultivating relationships with. Good companies, competitive compensation, cultures that seemed to value technical expertise. I spent the day having real conversations with people who understood what I brought to the table. Meanwhile, Commonwealth Financial Services was in full crisis mode. I heard about it later from Brenda, who'd stayed in touch. Olivia had tried to hire emergency consultants to crack the encryption. 4 different security firms looked at the system and said it would take weeks to reverse engineer, if it was even possible. The mathematical foundations were too specialized. Robert tried reaching out to professors at my alma mater, thinking they might help. Dead end. The mathematics were my original work, not something I learned in any class. The board held an emergency meeting Monday night. Discussed options from paying any amount I demanded to pursuing legal action for intentional sabotage. Their outside counsel advised strongly against the legal route. I hadn't broken any laws. I hadn't violated any contracts. Building sophisticated secure systems and then leaving when mistreated wasn't a crime. It was just good sense. Tuesday morning, the company's largest client called to ask why they couldn't access their quarterly statements. Then 3 more. Then the regulatory compliance officer started asking pointed questions about data accessibility. By Tuesday afternoon, Commonwealth had hired an outside security firm on an emergency basis to attempt a complete system reconstruction. Estimated timeline, 6 to 8 weeks, assuming they could figure out my methodology. Estimated cost, north of $500,000. The irony was painful. They could have given me a $25,000 raise and a title change. Instead, they were spending 20 times that to fix a problem that wouldn't have existed if they'd shown basic professional respect. Wednesday, I accepted a job offer from Meridian Financial Services. Senior Security Architect position. Salary almost triple what Commonwealth had paid. Signing bonus. Stock options. Comprehensive benefits. Real respect from people who understood what my skills were worth. The hiring manager there had seen my work mentioned in security industry publications. She said the encryption framework I'd developed had gotten attention in professional circles, not because I'd promoted it, but because auditors and regulators had referenced it as an example of best practices. They'd been trying to recruit me for months. Thursday evening, I got one final call from Robert. His voice was calmer this time. Resigned, almost defeated. The board is considering bankruptcy, he said flatly. If we can't restore client access by the end of next week, we'll face regulatory action that could force us to shut down entirely. We're also facing potential class actions from clients. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you really? His voice had an edge of bitter accusation. You designed the system knowing exactly what would happen when you left. I designed the system to protect your client's sensitive data from security breaches. The fact that it also requires qualified personnel to maintain is standard for any sophisticated technical infrastructure. That you didn't develop qualified personnel isn't my fault. That you didn't value the one person who understood it isn't my fault either. Consequence, right? His voice dripped skepticism. You could have prevented all of this, I said. For years of me asking for fair compensation and basic professional recognition. For years of you telling me to wait and be patient while you hired project managers at higher salaries to do nothing useful. For years of dismissing me as just a coder. You created this situation, Robert. I just stopped preventing the natural consequences of your own decisions. He didn't respond for a long moment. I could hear him breathing. Olivia resigned this morning, he said finally. Told the board she never had the technical background to oversee security infrastructure and shouldn't have been put in that position. Said her father pressured her into taking the role. Sounds like she figured out something you still haven't. What's that? That leadership means taking responsibility for failures, not just claiming credit for successes. I hung up. 2 weeks later, Commonwealth Financial Services filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The security firm they'd hired managed to eventually recover most of the client data after 8 weeks of intensive work, but not before federal regulators launched formal investigations. 3 separate class action lawsuits got filed by clients who couldn't access their financial records during tax season. The lead attorney on one of those suits called it the most preventable corporate collapse he'd ever seen. Brenda kept me updated. The week after the bankruptcy filing, she sent me a photo of Robert's empty office. Cleared out overnight. No goodbye email, no farewell meeting, just gone. The board had asked for his resignation. She said he'd been escorted out by security, carrying a single box. The same size box I'd carried out 6 weeks earlier. Funny how that worked. Olivia lasted 3 more days before she resigned, too. Brenda said she'd been crying in her office when the news broke about the lawsuits. Her father, Arthur Hayes, stepped down from the board the same week. Conflict of interest concerns. His family's name was dragged through every financial news outlet in the region for a month. The dominoes kept falling. The head of HR, Karen, was removed after the board discovered she'd buried 4 years of my written compensation requests. Turns out Robert had been telling her to file them away. Paper trails worked both ways. She tried to claim she was just following orders. The board didn't care. 2 of the project managers, the ones making more than me to organize meetings, both got laid off. Turns out when you're cutting staff, you start with the people who don't actually produce anything. Strategic Implementation Coordinator doesn't sound as impressive when the company can't access its own client database. Meanwhile, I started at Meridian. Corner office with actual windows. Team of 4 reporting to me. My first week, I sat in on a planning meeting where the CEO asked the technical staff for input before making infrastructure decisions. I almost fell out of my chair. She wanted to understand the technical implications before committing resources. Novel concept. My first month, I redesigned their encryption protocols. Built something even more elegant than what I'd created at Commonwealth. Documented everything properly. Cross-trained the whole team, so no single person was critical. My new boss reviewed my work and sent me a message saying it was the most thorough security architecture she'd ever approved. Asked if I'd present it to the board. I said yes. That presentation led to a budget increase for my department, new equipment, 2 additional hires, resources I'd begged Robert for, which he'd always said weren't in the budget. 3 months in, I got a LinkedIn message from someone at the restructured Commonwealth. New IT director they'd hired to rebuild from scratch. Said he'd heard I was the best in the region. Wanted to pick my brain. Offered consulting rates. I didn't respond. A week later, he messaged again. Said they were really struggling. The recovery firm had gotten the data back, but nobody understood how to build proper security infrastructure going forward. They were essentially starting from zero with a fraction of their former client base and a damaged reputation. I still didn't respond. 6 months after starting at Meridian, I was invited to speak at an industry conference about encryption architecture. Standing room only. My boss flew in just to watch. One guy hung back until the crowd cleared. Introduced himself as a consultant who'd worked on the Commonwealth Recovery Project. Older guy, gray beard, looked tired. That was your system, he said. I nodded. Took my team 3 weeks just to understand the mathematical foundations. Most elegant architecture I've ever seen. He pulled out his phone. Showed me a screenshot. Salary data from the bankruptcy filings. They paid you that? He asked. For building something like this? Yep. He laughed, shaking his head. My junior associates make more than that. No wonder you walked. Honestly surprised you stayed as long as you did. We shook hands. My boss was waiting by the exit. She'd heard the whole conversation. That true? She asked about the salary. Every word. She shook her head. Their loss. Our gain. Brenda texted me that same week with the final update on Robert. He'd been trying to get hired at other wealth management firms for months. Word had gotten around. 3 firms had interviewed him and passed. One hiring manager told him directly that his reputation preceded him. Last she heard, he was doing freelance consulting from his home office. Posted something on LinkedIn about being an independent advisor helping companies with operational excellence. The comment section was brutal. Someone had linked an article about the Commonwealth collapse. Career over at 57. I saved that text message. Not because I needed it, just felt right to have it documented. Last month, Meridian promoted me to Chief Security Officer. Board-level position. Salary that would have made Robert choke on his expensive coffee. The CEO called me into her office personally to deliver the news. Shook my hand. Said they were lucky to have me. I signed the new contract. Walked out to my team and told them. They actually cheered. First time in my career that coworkers seemed genuinely happy about my success instead of threatened by it. That evening, I came home and found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, plain white envelope. I opened it at the kitchen counter while Buddy waited for his dinner. Handwritten note from Robert. 2 sentences. I should have listened. I'm sorry. I read it once, then fed it through the shredder. Sometimes, I wonder if Robert could go back, if he'd actually listen this time.